Good afternoon, everyone, and it is my pleasure to present this session to you. And I really thank the organizers of this meeting and KCA's cooperation in helping us, first of all, to set up the Women in RCC program, which this initiative has done a lot of work already. We have a leadership training session going for selected applicants for this, and we are actually, depending on the feedback, we're planning on running this session again. We also started this to sort of narrow the disparity for women in academic careers who are focused research clinical-wise in kidney cancer. We have started some mentoring sessions, and we are also doing where junior faculty, we did a survey that told us that junior faculty, the biggest stumbling block for them is that they were not invited to give the presentations that would count towards their promotions. So we've started an initiative of kidney cancer presentations by junior faculty also. So that's a virtual session that happens a couple of times a year, so please feel free to join. That will be, the next one will be coming up in the summer, and it will be on the KCA website. But today our exciting time is to have a presentation by a keynote speaker. I would like to thank our sponsors, BMS, Eisai, and Exelixis, for helping us to put on this amazing presentation today. And we actually decided that it was time to reach out globally across, outside of medicine, and get some tips from a corporate person who has also had similar problems, I guess, of gender inclusivity in the workplace. And maybe we have all a common theme and things to learn from her. So our today's keynote speaker is a person, Anne Frank. She is Chief Executive of the Chartered Management Institute. This is UK's leading professional body for management and leadership with an international member community of over 200,000. She started her career at Procter & Gamble and has held senior executive positions at all of these different companies that you have heard about, I'm sure. Anne is actually from the US. She went to college at Columbia University, but now is pretty much settled in the UK and has created a career here. She's a regular columnist for the London Times in the New Year's Honors List 2020. She was given an award, OBE, for services to the workplace for equality. Her book, she's written a book on Create a Gender-Balanced Workplace, and this was published by Penguin Business in 2019. She has authored multiple articles about women and gender inclusivity in the workplace. And she was also awarded the inaugural MEMCOM Outstanding Contribution Award for her work in championing and acting as a role model in the membership sector. She holds several board positions and 5 honorary doctorates for her work in management and leadership. I was just going to say to her that compared to her, I have 1 doctorate, but anyway, that pales in comparison. But all I can say is that she is an excellent role model for all of us. In 2023, remember, there are just so many barriers still for women to narrow the gender gap. In 2023 was the first time that all the countries that have democracy and have voting rights, women, all of those countries for the first time have women allowed to vote. So we have a long way to go in narrowing this gap, and we have to, each one of us, do our part a little bit at a time. So with that, I will yield to our keynote speaker today. Thank you very much, Anne, for coming here and giving us your time and valuable thoughts. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you, Olga, for that very generous introduction, you know, the difference is your doctorate saves lives, okay? So that's I think that's more important. But what I'm going to talk with you about is career development for female professionals. But you might ask, you know, why do I care so much about gender balance? And as Olga said, CMI is about excelling in management and leadership. And one of the best ways to be a better manager and leader is to work in a gender-balanced environment, and we're going to explore why that is. So what are we going to cover? Well, we're going to talk about some of the benefits of gender balance in medicine and more generally. I'm going to give you a snapshot of global progress, where we are, generally first and then in medicine. We're going to talk about the top pitfalls, the top 5 pitfalls that get in the way of gender balance. 5 practices that work for organizations, and many of you are in organizations, whether that's a clinical practice, a hospital, or indeed a university. And then 5 things that you can all do, because so much of this is down to individual behavior. And there will be time for questions. So I'm going to rattle through a lot, but you'll have my slides and you can use them as reference points. And I know after this, we're also going to have an opportunity to talk some more. So I wanted to start just by asking, does anybody have any ideas about any benefits of gender balance, either in the medical profession or more generally? Any thoughts come to mind? Yeah, diversity of thought. And actually, that's a very important aspect, and we'll come on to what that helps with. It actually gets you better decisions, but it also reduces risk. So that's a great example. Any other thoughts? Yeah, bingo. That's actually something that I did a little research on this, and that came up. Better access to care. Because, for example, you know, women want a female to do their colonoscopy, right? So that was actually the example in the research, right? So that's another really good example. Any other? One more? Or what about the risk of failing to act? I mean, that's one, access to care. What about any other risks if you don't have gender balance? Some experience. Yes, absolutely. And in fact, yes, that figures in both the benefits and in some of the risks. So if you just trawl the literature and you look at some of the benefits that have been ascribed in medicine, you can see more attention to well-being, more empathy is one obvious aspect of having more gender balance, more female leaders in a team. And also, actually, women are also great allies for other marginalized groups, whether that's people of color or there are many people with disabilities. There are lots of common shared experiences that are quite universal. So that's another real plus point. The failure to act, actually, you have higher burnout. You have lower opportunities to achieve work-life balance. We'll come on to some of that later. Patient outcomes were mentioned. You actually do get better patient outcomes, just like you get better organizational financial performance. You get better patient outcomes when you have gender balance at the top of organizations. Some equipment just isn't designed right because it's been designed for men's hands, for example. That's a risk sometimes. Actually, by the way, same thing in the Army. The Army designed all their uniforms for men and they didn't fit women. And actually, they were at risk of getting killed because the uniform didn't fit if they were in combat. So it matters. And of course, access to care, which was mentioned. But let's just look generally, like beyond medicine. What are some of the global benefits? I'm going to start at the upper left. So the first is, it's been proven that gender-balanced organizations deliver better financial performance. I'm now talking obviously about the business world. MSCI, a major index, has done studies on this. Leading consultants like Bain and PwC have done this. And of course, there's McKinsey. Actually, they found that in the top quartile, organizations that had gender balance and were in that top quartile outperformed those in the bottom quartile by 25%. So a real incentive. And if you extrapolate that globally, as the World Economic Forum has done, if we lived in a gender-balanced world, the global GDP would increase by a whopping 26 trillion. It's bigger than the US and China combined. So obviously there are huge economic benefits from achieving this. But you might wonder, well, why is that? So if you just go to the bottom left, actually, when you have gender balance, you improve employee engagement, you improve culture. And you just create a better working environment. There are lots of studies that show this. My own organization has done a lot of that. People feel more included when they see more diverse teams, when they have more diverse leadership teams. But also a multinational did a study, and what they found is in their sites where they had globally better balance at leadership team level, they had 5 percentage points higher employee engagement. So there's some data. So the individual that mentioned the better decision making, that's the next thing in the center there. That's been proven. Diverse teams take better decisions than homogeneous teams. And that's by several tens of percentage points of better decisions, and that's been monitored in research. And equally, the Association of Risk Management looked at the #1 cause of the 21 trillion corporate failure since the turn of the century, and guess what it was? Groupthink. And what's groupthink? It's a bunch of people sat around the table that look just like each other, sound just like each other, and have the exact same experiences, lived experiences, and that's actually leads to very bad decision-making in a number of crisis situations. Of course, the other thing is it does help you to recruit and retain talent, and actually, retain is important because I know that, and we'll come on to this, the entry level in medicine is quite diverse, the top less so. I'm going to come on to that. And of course, you are physicians and clinicians and doctors. You serve everybody. Your community is diverse, so you should be too. You'll better serve that community if you look more like them. So there's a lot of benefits that have been proven for gender balance. There are also some snapshots, and very unfortunately, I wish I could sit here and tell you that this problem is solved. Actually, we do surveys that say that 1/3 of men in the UK think it's gone too far. We are so far off from solving this problem. We've talked so much about it. We haven't done nearly enough. In the UK, one of many countries where gender pay gap reporting is mandatory, 8 out of 10 organizations still pay men more than women. That's the gender pay gap. When you peel that onion, if I'm just going down now to the left-hand side, what we see is what I call the glass pyramid. You've heard of the glass ceiling, but what we see in the corporate world, and because nonprofit and government agencies report in the UK too, in those situations, we see lots of women, maybe 50-50, at the bottom 25% of an organization. But then as you go up the hierarchy of those organizations, those women slip off. That's why I call it the glass pyramid. They disappear. They leave. And you get more and more imbalance, such at the top of organizations, you typically have over 80% men. Globally, we still only have 5% female CEOs, for example. So that glass pyramid is a shape that is very familiar, and you will recognize it in your profession as well. Now, some of the other facts about the progress is that we don't have anywhere near enough females in leadership. So in the UK, there is an example on the FTSE 350 boards that was very successful in getting women on boards, but we still only have 28% women in the executive leadership positions and 10 FTSE 350 CEOs. Sadly, the American US S&P figures came out this week, and it's gone backwards for the first time in 6 years. And in fact, even the gender pay gap in the UK, and you know how much it decreased by last year? 0.1%. Like, that's nothing. Not anywhere near good enough. Now, the top performers in this area are the Nordics. Anybody here from the Nordics? Take a bow. It's Iceland, it's Norway, it's Sweden. You do a lot of the things that work, but you do also have quotas. Many countries also believe that they should achieve these things voluntarily. In political leadership, we still don't have enough women. 11% of the leaders are female. In the UK, 27% of parliamentarians and 22% of ministers. So nowhere near enough. So there is so much more to do. And globally, about 28% of managers are women. And at the current rate of change, the World Economic Forum tells us, for that to get to 30%, it's going to be 2050. More than 25 years. The progress is glacial. So we got to speed it up. So let's take a look at medicine. What this chart does is just look at universities and hospitals, and the gray line in the middle, that would be the gender balance line. This is just looking at the leadership positions in universities and in hospitals. You can see that nobody hits that line. The green are women and the blue are men. So, you can draw your own conclusions there. You have a glass pyramid in medicine, just like everybody in the corporate sector. And that is corroborated by a lot of other research. I'll just share some of it. Women make up greater than 50% of medical school enrollments in the US, but oh my goodness, 18% of the deans are women. 80%. That's that glass pyramid in action. 80%, 82% are men. So that is still very much a factor. And of course, it's also true the more senior roles, the senior dean level, although 51 of the entry level are women, it's still only 39% in those more senior positions. So it's, again, exactly the same as that kind of glass pyramid that I mentioned earlier. Medicine has the same issue. And the same is true in Spain. 28% of the leaders in Spain, where we are, this beautiful place, are women. 61% of the staff are women. And at conferences like these, last year, I think 4 conferences had women speakers greater than 1, i.e. more women speakers. So that there are still very many barriers in this profession as well. So what are some of the barriers? And these are, again, universal. And the biggest single one is the one right in the middle. It's behavior and culture. Actually, we know that 4 out of 5 people still experience bias. And I have heard many examples also in medicine of bias. It can be the patient saying, "Where's the doctor?" And the doctor is that woman right in front of them. That's a great example of bias. It can be somebody on a screening committee. I've mentored senior scientists at Cancer Research saying that they've been turned down for opportunities because, the panel, and that's in the upper right-hand corner there, is all consisting of much older men, and there's bias against taking the submission from that young, very talented, very able cancer researcher. That's an example of bias. So that is really one of the biggest barriers. There's not enough sponsorship, and if you are a senior leader, whether you're a male or a woman, you've got a man or a woman, you've got all these young women entering the profession. They need sponsoring, and there's only 1 in 10 corporates do this, and I bet fewer than 1 in 10 hospitals and clinics do this. So there's not enough sponsorship, and we'll come on to that. And then there is the motherhood penalty. 65% of women take a step back in their career when they have kids, and when they come back, instead of valuing their experience because they're so much better at multitasking and very much more focused, and they're held back because people assume they're no longer ambitious. And why? Do you know that? Have you talked to them? So that's another issue, of course. And then, apart from some of those panels I mentioned, there are other biases built into recruitment and selection processes. So all male panels are, you can't do that anymore. You're not going to make good decisions if you're doing that. Also, what often happens is when a man advocates for himself, people say, "My, he's confident," or, "Oh, isn't he assertive?" When a woman advocates for herself, she's aggressive or abrasive. There was a study of performance reviews, and that's exactly the language that was used. The man was confident and assertive, and the woman was abrasive or aggressive. That's bias, plain and simple. So there's a lot of these examples, and also other languages. This is an example from the tech industry. But if you're going to advertise for coding ninjas, they really did that, you're not going to get many women applying because they don't want to be, they don't relate to being a coding ninja. So, you have to look at your language. There are apps you can use for this stuff now that will bias the language that you're using. It's within your gift not to have all these male panels and to mix up the panels. And it's also within your gift to take a look at the language you're using to describe people. But of course, the other thing that does happen a lot, and this is a societal thing, it happens very early on for women and girls, is what we call the confidence gap. And there's literature about this. So if you have 10 attributes for a job, and a woman looks at that job description, and she meets 9 out of the 10. And what does she do? She stresses about the one she doesn't meet. And that's a societal thing. You're taught to be a perfectionist, always know the answer, always raise your hand, never fail. If a man looks at that application, this is a real piece of research, meets 6 out of 10, he thinks, I'm a great candidate for the job. I'm going to apply. I'll just learn the rest on the job. Because, he's taught from an early age to have that confidence, to lean into things, and to learn how to develop resilience, including learning how to fail. So these are some of the pitfalls. They're very common. I think they're very universal, to be honest. Right. So what can we do about all of this? Well, the good news is there's a lot we can do, and there are many organizations in parts that have made real progress. And I've looked at a lot of these organizations, and I can tell you all of the organizations that make progress on this topic, which does take time and is hard work and does need to involve men, and I'll come back to that, you can do this. If you do these 5 things. They all, to some degree or another, do these 5 things. The first thing is, targets. I mean, you're looking at studies at this conference, right? You're measuring stuff, right? Because how are you going to know if something works if you're not measuring your data and looking at the outcome? Same with this. You've got to look at your own data and set a target and track your progress. You've got to actually make this explicit and something that's measured. There's a saying, what gets managed gets measured, and what gets measured gets done, right? So it's the same thing here. So that's one thing to really start with. The other thing that's really important is to have sponsorship programs. If you are a senior leader, I strongly advocate, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, find a talented young woman in your organization that it's in that bottom half and sponsor her. Now, what's a sponsor? A sponsor advocates for somebody when they're not in the room. This is somebody whose talent you truly believe in. A talented young person beginning their career. And what you want to do is give them access to your networks. You want to say, yes, submit that paper. I will back you. You want to say, yes, go for that position. Do that stretch assignment. I will back you. That's what sponsors do. They advocate for that person when that person is not in the room. I've heard some stories of people doing the exact opposite and shutting down talented young women rather than sponsoring them because they want to speak up. That's not good. Also, you can mentor. Now, a mentor talks with a person. A sponsor talks about that person maybe when they're not there. And one of the most powerful tools, I believe, is reverse mentoring. So again, if you're a senior leader in an organization, 80%, most of you likely to be men, why don't you find a young, talented woman that doesn't look at all like you and has had a completely different experience and listen to her experience? Just ask her, how do you find working in X hospital or Y university? And listen to the answer. Because I think you'll be shocked at some of the stories you hear, and it might help you be more empathetic and aware of some of the things going on in your own backyards, something that you as a leader are in a position to do something about. So sponsoring and reverse mentoring is incredibly, incredibly important. Men have to get involved. The research is that this stuff doesn't work without men, so I'm delighted to have some men in the audience. You have to get involved in this. Oh, by the way, it's good for you too, because, men have emotions, men have feelings, men have families. And when you have these gender balanced teams, you feel more comfortable. You don't have to be the big alpha all the time. A lot of men don't want to do that, especially not younger men. And so this enables, men to actually be more human as well as women. So it is something that really does work for everybody. And I want to touch on flexible working. We can't really do, most organizations that make progress focus on outcomes, not face time. I understand the limitations, obviously, that many parts of medicine face in doing that, but you can still have flexible shifts. And there is research that suggests even when you must be physically present, if you allow people more agency in fitting their work around their life, you get better performance because they are more bought in because they're allowed to fit their work around their life more. So that again is an incredibly important aspect of what needs to be done. And that last point is, and this is hard, but if you see these biases, if you see the older leader interrupting or shutting down the young, promising clinician or researcher or doctor, call it out. Say something. This is especially true if you're a man, because engaging men is more effective. One of the best ways of helping to change a culture is, if you are a male leader and you believe in this, to say to your colleague, hey, what you said to Jenny in that meeting, you shut her down. She was making a good point. Why do you think you did that? You don't have to say, you don't have to shout at them. You don't have to be rude. You do have to call it out. If you don't call it out, you're kind of complicit because it's just going to carry on. Unless we make people aware, and most of this behavior is not malicious, it's not intentional, it's just learned. Of course, there are always the malicious people, and I have no truck with them. I mean, they really need not only to be called out, but sued and removed. And actually, I know CEOs that do exactly that. The first CEO of the FTSE 100 to achieve gender balance did exactly that. He said, he targeted all his executives on gender balance. And he said to me, I interviewed him, he's in the book, I kind of look at this like running a factory. If you're the factory manager and you have deaths in your factory and you don't deal with that and your health and safety record doesn't improve, what happens? You get fired. Well, I believe this is something similar. We believe in gender balance teams, and we're measuring everybody. And you all have a baseline, you all start from somewhere, that's fine as long as you're making progress. But if year after year after year you're not making any progress, you're out. And that's what he did. He was the first FTSE 100 to achieve gender leadership, and now they have all the most inclusive workforce of any FTSE almost, about disability, ethnic minorities, because inclusivity begets inclusivity. Loud parenting is another great thing. If you're a parent, especially if you're a leader, I'm off to my daughter's soccer game, or I'm off to my son's school play, or whatever it is, or I'm not having that meeting then because you know what? We have family dinner then. It's not hard for you to set an example. That's called loud parenting. You should do it, especially if you're a man, because what you're doing is giving, especially the younger men in your organization, permission that that's okay to behave like you do. And you wouldn't believe how much people pay attention to not what you say at the top about this stuff, but what you do. So that's another thing that really works. And lastly, shared parental leave. Young men want to spend time, and unless you make it legitimate, because a lot of corporations that put shared parental leave in, because it's stigmaed, because the bosses don't do it, they won't do it because they think it's going to cost them their career. So, again, make it okay. Say, yeah, actually, take your parental leave. Do it. Because you want to role model that it's okay to be a dad. It's okay to have a family. It's okay to talk about it and admit. And, you know, when people talk to men that haven't grown up this way, so young people that talk to men, the loud parenting person I quoted in here, he says when he talks to men that have been in the business 30 years and they're so used to having all their colleagues be men, and, you know, some of them, when he really talks about this, get quite emotional. And they say, you know, I've missed my kids' lives. I've missed my family. It's too late for me, but I just wish I could do it over again because that's what matters to me. And so, you know, it is something that can be learned no matter what your age. So what can you do about it? Well, the first step, and this is for the women, and this is a real life example when I was mentoring those very talented cancer research scientists that wanted the promotion. You know, she said, oh, well, my stuff isn't good enough. I said, well, what are the criteria? And so she told me. I said, okay, your assignment is benchmark everything you've done for that criteria, and then let's talk about it next time. So she did. She benchmarked all her achievements. And then I said, okay, now just look at those achievements dispassionately as a scientist. You're looking at a colleague, not yourself. What percentile would you put that person in? She said, oh my God, I'd put them in the 90th percentile. I said, well, that person's you. Go for the job. She did, she got it. So keeping an achievement log and then acting on it, go in with your data and your log and say, right, you know, here's why I deserve that promotion. Here's why I deserve to be at that conference. Here's why I deserve to present that paper. Go in and ask, advocate for yourself. You know, again, using your facts and your data. That's very, very important. Obviously, all of you can be sponsors or mentors, or if you're young and just starting out in your career, you know, some of the people I heard pitching their posters or starting out in their career, sponsor those people. Be a mentor to them, encourage them, right? So I think that and if I were one of those poster people, I'd be looking for a sponsor or a mentor at this conference, right? Because you do have to seek out these things. Of course, all of us, and this is probably the biggest thought of all of us can change how we behave. And we can challenge our colleagues to change how they behave. Because that's what culture is. It's your everyday behavior. It's not a bunch of slogans on the wall. You know, it's not that booklet they hand out. It's how people treat each other every day in the workplace. And we are all in control of our behavior. And you can all change your behavior to be more inclusive by doing some of the things that we've been talking about. Understanding how others are feeling, asking them about their lived experiences, making sure that in your own teams you have balance, making sure that your promotions are based on merit rather than relationships. This is something that's within your agency that you can all do. And if you live in a country like the UK that publishes gender pay gaps, look up your organization's pay gap. You know, I was chatting to Olga beforehand. Goldman Sachs, they're not here. You want to know what their payback, their gender pay gap is? Any guesses? 52%. That means on average, men in that organization earn 52% more than women. It's gotten worse, by the way. And every year in their annual report, they say, we care about women in leadership. That's a classic example of say, but don't do. Don't get caught in that trap. If you just don't say it, do it, would be my suggestion. Now, we have some time for questions. So I want to make sure that I ask you if you have any questions. I have some teed up in case you don't, but I'm sure you do. Somebody. Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you very much. And clearly speaking to the field of doctors. So I'm sure we'll have questions to help people to come to the mic. We may throw some at. So first one is, you said, try to have index that you can follow. So what would be the recommendation? Which one? The promotion, the salary? What is the easiest one to monitor the gender gap?
Okay, so a great question. And, you know, there are a lot of countries that do this, and they do it in different ways. I actually think the main things you need to do are you need to look at your population by quartile. right? So this is a simple HR exercise. You divide people into 4 groups. Bottom 25, next quartile, top quartile. Measure the percentage of women and men in each quartile. I guarantee you, I showed you the data, you're going to see a glass pyramid. That's because it's not about recruiting in women. You got plenty of those in the bottom quartile, but you're not promoting them. So promote proportionately. If there's one thing I could say to you that you should all do, is promote proportionately. I can't tell you the number of CEOs and others that say, but 50% of my intake is female. Goldman Sachs. So what? If you don't promote the people, 90% of the top will be men.
So the question of promotion is important, and I love the example you gave of the 9 out of 10 versus 6 out of 10, because it means that women may not reach out and apply for this potential new job. So what is recommended? What is your recommendation? That basically we go get them?
Sponsorship, yes. I can't tell you the number of CEOs, male CEOs, who have told me, I had to, we had a promotion. Every single man in the department applied. That's actually not who I wanted. I wanted this incredibly talented young woman to apply. She thought, I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm not going to get that, because she was stressing. He went and tapped her on the shoulder and said, I want you to apply for this position. He wasn't the only deciding person on the panel, but, he sponsored her, right? I know another CEO of a US company that's rated very highly on this. He saw my successor is going to be this woman. He saw that 5 years before he stepped down. He sponsored her. She said, why are you doing that to me? He said, because you're the best candidate, right? So you do have to tap people on the shoulder and reach out to them and encourage them.
And so that speaks to the question of building confidence. Do you have other tips than the sponsorship?
Yeah, the achievement log, right? So I always tell women, keep a log of your achievements, just keep it in, and make them objective, not, it has to be meaningful for your profession, right? Delivered X project, Y, and in Y time at, Z ahead of budget in the corporate world. In the medical world, it's ran X trial with Y promising results, or presented X paper, or whatever it is, right? And keep that log up to date. And then look at it dispassionately with scientific eyes. If you saw that person, what would you think of them? I bet you'd think they were pretty damn good. Well, that person's you.
So the achievement log is fantastic. So this is something that we can definitely help as well, because we can build some kind of template for people to fill in and build their confidence. So we have a first question, please.
I actually have 2 comments, if that's okay, and then 1 question. So the first comment is, incredible presentation, a lot of very pertinent points, especially in medicine. I want to say that one of the critical aspects of at least my career has been sponsorship from a female surgical oncologist, correct? Mm-hmm. Because there's only 4% of us. And in this day and age, it's pretty ridiculous to have only 4% female representation within a specialty. So not until you see one do you think you can be one. And in fact, from having me in my institution, we have been able to have over 5 female urologic oncologists go into fellowship. So it's critical to have someone who looks like you. The other thing I wanted to say is that there are a lot of sort of non-promotion tasks that are female assigned, yeah. Which I think you didn't mention, but I think it's one of the things that as you grow in your career, realize that there's things that are asked of you or assigned of you that are non-promotion. And it's very difficult when you start to say no. However, I think if you can touch base on some of the ways that you can say no politely to those tasks, knowing that they're not going to increase your salary or your promotion.
That is an outstanding point. There is a word for that, and my friend at the FT, who's the Work and Careers editor, coined it, and it's escaping me right now. But you're so right. It's organizing the office party or the office rota, or all of these unpaid tasks that do not get you anywhere. So don't do them. Keep your tasks focused on the things that you need to advance your career. It does not mean that you don't care about your colleagues. But you've got to learn to say no. You can just say, thanks so much for thinking of me, but I'm so busy working on X paper or Y study. It's not a good time for me to do that. Maybe you want to consider asking James.
And the other thing I notice is that it also happens on the other side where people in the department will approach you with these brilliant ideas and have you do all the work. But then potentially something that you're not really interested in, but instead of approaching James, who might not be interested or say no to the idea, I think females get approached to do someone's brilliant ideas a lot more, whether you're in training or whether you're a fellow or whether you're staff. And I think that's another critical thing, is that if you're not interested in that project or whatever you're doing, it's okay to say no, because a lot of times females are seen as, the helpers, the facilitators.
Absolutely, and I go back to those extremely talented cancer scientists. One of them was given this really duff job by her male head of department. It was completely useless for her career. And basically, she knew that, and I said, well, then why are you doing it? And anyway, she transferred out under that person. She got out of that and went into a department where she could do meaningful work, and she got a promotion. She runs a major cancer research lab at a university now in the UK, because she got out from under that. So get out from under that is my advice.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Birdie.
So I'm a patient advocate, and I used to work in IT before, and I was the only female in an IT section, a global IT section. And I was always asked questions like, can you make a coffee real quick? Nobody was asked if they could make a coffee. And I always said, no, I don't even drink coffee. I don't know how to make coffee. Can you show me? I met another female IT person, and she was so male. She always said strictly no. And this is what I learned. I have to say no. I have to be less empathetic against my male co-workers, I have to say. So the only thing that I was really doing after a while, I had a whole bunch of sweets on my table in my room. Because then they would come by, pick up those sweets, and tell me all the gossip. And then I could, extract from this gossip and, work myself up. Because, this person is doing this or that. So I got a lot of ideas that I could put in projects. So this is like you catch the man with sweets, I would have to say, and then they would sponsor you too. Because then my boss, works. He was constantly at my sweets desk, So
yeah. Well, whatever works, and congratulations on learning how to say no, because you do need to say no. Like your colleague, she's not being male; she's just looking after her. What she's there to do and what her priorities are and what she's not there to do. And, I recently was on a panel with a black lord in the House of Lords. There are not many black lords, and there's certainly not many black lords that grew up on council estates like this guy did. He was sat in the House of Lords library 3 times. First time somebody comes up, excuse me, can you photocopy this for me? He was so used, like you, he did it. And he's like, Jesus, why am I doing it? The second time, he sort of said, I'm sorry, I'm very busy with my work. And the third time, he said, no, I cannot, but we have lovely staff over there that will do it for you. You've got to learn to advocate for yourself. So good for you.
Hi, thank you so much for a really wonderful presentation. I just wanted to bounce a conversation I had with somebody off you just to see how I might have responded better in the situation. So I was discussing equality in the workforce with somebody I know, and I was talking about the inequality at high levels, and the response I had to this was, at the end of the day, Charlotte, if you are leaving work to go and pick up your kids and these men are staying on longer, they are working longer hours, they are gaining more experience, therefore they are better qualified for the jobs. And I mean, I was astounded. This was a woman I was speaking to, and I was so shocked. I essentially just said, well, let's agree to disagree, and I shut down the conversation. And I just, still reflecting on that, I still don't know what I should have said in that situation. And I was just wondering how you think you would have responded to that comment.
So there's data that shows that presenteeism, which is what that is, does not equal productivity. So it's presenteeism does not equal productivity. Too many promotions are made on the basis of presenteeism. And really, what you need to say, and I often say this, is you have to focus on the outcomes, not the office time. What are their outcomes? What have they accomplished? What does their work say? This isn't standing outside the boss's door and schmoozing him and waiting for him to go to lunch, because that's what a lot of that is. And actually, interestingly, with the hybrid working, we've done some research, and some organizations are like, back to the office. Most all those organizations are led by older white men in financial services, by the way. And it's not, it's wrong. But what you can do, if one company looked at, this back to the office mandate, and his concern was, the problem is the people that did come back to the office are all the schmoozers and time wasters and the people that are jockeying for the promotions, and the really good people that were getting a lot done. They said, no, back me or sack me, but I ain't coming to the office 5 days in a row. And there is evidence. There's a great study by Nicholas Bloom, one of the leading academics, that involves, I think, 5 countries, maybe more, 30,000 people. Hybrid working boosts productivity. I would just send that to this woman.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we are going to have to adjourn, but I would like everybody to come up and help us take a group picture of all of us together that will be showcased on the KCA website under the Women in RCC. So please stay for a few minutes and get that picture. The other thing I do want to mention, a huge thanks to my sister-in-law, Devyani Vaishampayan, and she is actually in the HR field in the UK. And because of her, I got a referral to Anne, because otherwise I didn't know where to start to find somebody in Europe who would be a charismatic speaker for us. So I thank her, and huge thanks to Anne, of course, who right away responded when we asked her and kindly agreed to give her time.
And thank you all, Karen. I also want to thank you for this wonderful talk. I want to highlight the fact that KCA has really changed the game by taking this question into consideration. There is now active group coaching, and there are many questions that are coming out that we touched on today, but also like the last part was about how to negotiate, how to present yourself. There are techniques to learn that you may not be familiar with. Today, you highlighted very simple action item that everyone can bring back home and work on. And so I want to stress the fact that KCA and really in this regard has made a huge progress. And it's still a work in progress, but I think it's number 5 of the group coaching out of 10, and there will be others. So please check online what KCA offers in this regard. Thank you for Gretchen for pushing this effort, because that will clearly enhance our ability within the field of kidney cancer to provide better care to our patient and more diversity to our research as well. So thank you very much. And then we go get the group picture, okay?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's also some copies of the book that you have. So,
Okay.
So do take advantage of that. I think they're somewhere. I don't know where. But thank you so much for the opportunity and for all your questions. And good luck, because you can change this. It's down to all of you in the room.
And please keep the interaction going with us.